We call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. and our only agenda item of business tonight is to interview Dr. Carol Learned Miller. Did I pronounce that correctly? All right. And we will start with just noting a couple of housekeeping. We've had a few of these, so I'm housekeeping items. Mayor Wiedegartner, who I think you talked to last week, is on vacation, and she will not be with us tonight. And Member Wall, Jean Wall, who was the chair of our search committee and brought us a wonderful pool of candidates, is not able to be with us unexpectedly tonight. So she will have the opportunity to see your interview on video, and she sends her regrets that she isn't able to be with us. So you will see a little bit of bouncing around of the questions. It doesn't flow the same as it did when we had everyone, but I'm guessing you can handle where the question's coming from. Yeah. Okay. And we're going to do a three-part format. Have you make an opening statement initially, and after that we have a series of 10 questions. Like I said, we'll go around. You do have the questions also in front of you, and why don't we start now with having each of our school committee members introduce themselves.
Glenn Johnson-Musad, I'm the secretary of the committee.
Katie Karen, we've met before on the phone. Thank you. Susan Ekstrom, I'm the vice chair of the committee, as Glenn pointed out.
And I'm Amy Prietti, I'm the chair.
I'm Sue Hollins. I'm not the chair or the secretary, but I've been on the longest.
Yes, we were just talking about Member Hollins having how long she's been on the school committee. Yeah. I do want to also note that all of the candidates have had the opportunity to hear the basketball in the background. So this is consistent with the atmosphere we've had all of the evenings. It is very equitable. That's what we're striving for. And then if you'd like now, we'll have you give an opening statement to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, good evening. My name is Dr. Carol Learned Miller, and it's really my great honor to be here tonight as a finalist for Superintendent of the Greenfield Public Schools. It has truly been an incredible pleasure spending the day with your community. I am moved by the community's unified commitment to Greenfield's public schools. So, I have been asked to share a little bit about myself. So first and foremost, I am a mother of 3. I live in Amherst and have lived there for about 13 years. My husband's a professor at UMass, so we're there for the long haul. Second, I'm very collaborative to work with, and I believe strongly the key to making any necessary change is by first forging trusting relationships. If chosen to be superintendent, I would start by listening and really truly building strong relationships with each of you, so together we could strengthen our schools and our programs. Something that's very important to say is that as superintendent, I will be visible in my role as chief instructional leader and spend time in the schools supporting the principals and learning how we can best meet the needs of our children. I will also be visible in the rest of the community, sharing our work and hearing from all of our students as well as their families about their dreams for our schools. Throughout my career, these 6 core values have guided my work. They would continue to guide my work here as superintendent in Greenfield. First, I believe educators must provide high expectations for all students, as well as the nurturing and individualized support students need to meet those high expectations. We should also provide an engaging curriculum that centers standards alignment, cultural responsiveness, as well as real-world problem solving. We should provide ongoing analysis of data to ensure equity and access to enriching opportunities for every single child. We should provide continuous improvement of teacher and leader practice through research, collaboration, professional learning, and instructional coaching. We should provide and really foster active partnerships with family and community. And finally, and probably most importantly, we should be sure to have meaningful relationships with one another and our students to truly build trust, to build equity, and to ensure social emotional well-being of all members of our community. Through my conversations, both today and over the last month, I have learned that Greenfield is looking for someone who is truly collaborative and a strong communicator, is visible in the community, has a deep commitment to social justice, is deeply committed to exceptional instruction in every classroom that incorporates social emotional learning at every level. Someone who is creative, innovative, and also an effective problem solver, as well as an effective fundraiser. A leader who is visionary and who can truly unite the community. I do believe that these are the very strengths that I've brought to my leadership roles previously as a principal, a central office administrator, as well as the leader of a nonprofit organization. For this reason, I do believe this role is truly an excellent match for my skill set, and I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve as your superintendent. Together, I believe that we can make Greenfield a model of what learning and a learning organization can be for every child.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go right into the questions at this point. I'm curious if you knew anything about Greenfield or Franklin County before applying for the job, and if so, what was it? What is it?
So as you know, I don't live very far away from Franklin County. I'm just on the southern border in Hampshire County. So I knew it was beautiful, and I still do. But some of the things that I've also learned is the county has 70,000 people, 70,000 with 17,000 of them living here in Greenfield. About 10% living in Franklin County are living at or below the poverty line. I know here in Greenfield, we're at about 50%, 55%. Economically disadvantaged, and I know also the racial composition in the wider community, wider county, is about 10% white, 90% white, 10% people of color, and I know here in Greenfield we have about 70% white citizens, 30% people of color. I also know Franklin County is the least populous of all the counties in mainland of Massachusetts, and that it's really has an amazing agricultural success and passion, and that there's also really a creative, both musical and artistic community interest. So I love that it's diverse. I love that the arts are really celebrated, and I love that there's such a strong connection to nature.
Thank you.
I have the next question. There will be an election for 3 of our 7 members in November. I have been on the school committee for 6 years, we've clarified, and during that time the responsibilities and the focus have varied greatly. What do you envision as the role of the school committee member, and why do you think people should get involved?
I was actually recruiting people to run for school committee earlier today because I think that everyone should run. I really do think that it's very important that the school committee is representative of the whole community so that we really hear the perspectives of the full community. So really the school committee's role is to set policy, to hold me as superintendent accountable for really executing on that policy. However, we certainly need to collaborate and be in close contact to be sure that not only is the policy set, but we've created plans for careful implementation that I would oversee with your support. So, I encourage everyone to consider running. I think having a really engaged, really diverse school committee really brings new insight. And I also think that having school committee members, something that's very important about it is you are communicating the great news from our schools. So you are sharing all the good work that's being done, as well as, really getting input from the community that will be useful for us to know as we set new policy for the future.
As I mentioned, it's going to come back to me now and does this for a little bit. This was actually the mayor's question, this next one. The roles and responsibilities of school committees and superintendents are sometimes clear and sometimes ambiguous. For example, budget approval versus budget implementation, or personnel policy and finance versus personnel administration, or even dealing with parents and teachers with concerns or complaints. Can you describe some situations where these roles and responsibilities have challenged you and how you would work to address them as our superintendent?
Sure. So thanks for the question. I think this is certainly a place where that core value that I was talking to you about earlier of really having the trusted relationships would really be huge, because there are going to be gray areas. We have a pretty clear vision of what, your role is and what mine is, but we may enter into hard periods, as we all were in this past year with the pandemic, where there's going to be problems that none of us have ever seen. So truly having a trusting relationship where we can talk about, is this something that you should handle, something that I should handle, will be very important. Something that has been a challenge for me is I am very responsive. So if a parent calls and, I'm in a central office role, I do want to be responsive to them. However, I think having a certain protocol so that everybody's really clear on what the process is, if there's a budget question, if there's some sort of parent concern, this is the process that we go through. So when a parent has called me and I'm in a central office role, I do call the parent back and say, I really appreciate your concern. I am going to refer this matter to the principal. They are really the person on the scene who can help. However, I will check in to be sure that everything has been, handled really well. So just to return to your original question, I think really working closely together for when there are gray areas to have a conversation about how we'll handle what, but at the same time having really clear protocols and systems so that we all understand for most problems and challenges how matters should be solved.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm up. Student achievement is at the core of the public school system. In regard to performance, how would you use the data from our schools to prioritize the use of resources including money, facilities, and human capital. Would this be a collaborative discussion with the school committee and the public? And if so, or if not, how?
So, some people in the room, I think, have heard that I'm a big data nerd. So, I really, really love to use data to inform any decision that I'm making. And really, this is the work that I do in the field every day with leaders across the country. So, really analyzing data. So, certainly that includes standardized data such as the MCAS, but it also includes observational data from walking through classrooms. It also includes formative data. So I want to be sure I get all pieces of it. So really, I think that data should be first and foremost when making any important decisions. Data, if you look carefully at it, will help you to understand whatever the root causes of the challenges you're having are. And then once you've really dug down to those root causes, you can make really careful and thoughtful decisions about, what your most urgent needs are. Once you have a clear sense of what those needs are, then you can prioritize budgetary decisions as well as how you're going to do your scheduling. Really, any major decision that you're making should come from your analysis of data.
Many schools have been transitioning from using traditional discipline to a model of restorative justice where students are coached to resolve problems and make amends through communication and mediation. What's your picture of the school's role in addressing student conflicts and misbehavior?
So, personally, as a principal, I did implement restorative practices in my school in Cambridge. I really am a big fan of rethinking discipline. I was talking to the parents earlier here in the meet and greet. Historically, discipline has really been about removing children, and something that I really love about restorative practices is it's a much more inclusive model. It's really about bringing children in and centering their needs. And if there is a sort of quote-unquote misbehavior, truly teaching rather than punishing. So I really believe it's a great model. There's some new research that really supports it. So certainly this is something that I wouldn't want to decide just by myself. I would really want to talk to community members, talk to principals, talk to students to really understand what their experiences are. But my experience personally is using restorative practices creates a much more inclusive school, much more inclusive classroom. And the other thing that's really important is it becomes a very dangerous cycle if students are constantly being sent out of the classroom for being disciplined. They are then losing that instructional time. And when they lose that instructional time, they fall further behind. When they fall further behind, they return to the class and they're confused and then more likely to misbehave again. So really, restorative practices as well as other methods for really including students and using misbehavior as a teachable moment as opposed to really a reason for sending a student out of class, I think makes all the sense in the world.
Apologies, making notes. The lines between being an institution for learning and being a social service agency often get blurred. How have you navigated that in your career in education, and how do you mentor and advise less seasoned professionals in managing this reality in their own careers?
So, this is really a great question. So, though we are a school system, we really are the home for many, many children in our community. So though we, may not see ourselves as social service provider, we really have to be responsive to the mental health needs for our community members. So personally, what I've done in schools where I've led is really try to be a data nerd, really assess what are the needs. So in Cambridge, for example, what we did was we did a trauma review, and we found within our school that 90% of students were currently experiencing or had recently experienced some real strong trauma. And as a result, we looked at what are the resources that we have available and found what we had were really falling short. We had one school counselor, and all of her time was really focused on serving students who were on IEPs, who saw her as part of their plans, which was very important. But what we did, and I think truly this is symbolic of my leadership, is we looked at the data, we determined what students needed, which was much more support from more social workers, then really got creative to solve this problem. So what I did was I wrote a grant and sought additional funding from a foundation, and we were able to employ an extra social worker. The focus that she had, rather than servicing students who were on IEPs, she was really focused on students who weren't on IEPs, but really we had assessed as having some trauma that they really needed support around. So she made home visits, she did one-on-one therapy, and she really provided groups, whatever we needed, she was able to be responsive of. The other thing that she did, probably that we're going to need this year coming through the pandemic, is she supported staff. So she, really paid close attention to teachers who were feeling really struggling and, offered one-on-one support to them. She was really an excellent resource if people needed to have some sort of connection outside of the school. So she was not only really connecting families, truly in really wraparound fashion, but she was really there as a support for staff. And I think this coming year, probably more than ever, because of all the trauma everyone has been through with COVID, we're really going to need some extra mental health support, and really thinking creatively out of the box in this way to find funding for those special needs, I think will be really important.
My turn. School districts start planning a budget 8 to 20 months ahead in the next year. How do you conceptualize a budget that far in advance? And if you were, say, a $500,000 shortfall shows up in the middle, what do you do to cut or reduce, or where would you start?
Okay. Thanks, Katie. So I was telling somebody, I think the mayor, whenever I'm in charge of a budget, you see me running around with it in my purse because, I'm just always really monitoring whatever budget I'm responsible for. I've been responsible for smaller budgets and certainly larger ones. So I think the first part of your question, Katie, is just really keeping track, of all of our spending and having a really up to the moment budget in front of me at all times, so I know, what our challenges are. The other thing is really being in close communication with the senior leadership team so that I know, in terms of planning ahead, what it is that we really need, what's most urgent. And so, I can start to plan whether it's with the school district budget, or, is there additional funds that we need, that I need to, be writing a grant for or seek from a foundation. So talking regularly to principals, figuring out what their needs are, keeping careful track of the budget, being very planful. If there were to be a shortfall, what I would do is get, again, really with my senior leadership team to determine, what are the things that we can do without, and really try to be creative about it. Two quick stories that I'll tell. So just this past year, part of my role, so two things that I do, I kind of wear two hats. One of the hats that I wear is helping to manage an organization similar to managing a school district. I'm in charge of the strategic plan, help to oversee the budget, supervise individuals. The other half of what I do is train and coach leaders in the field. So we had a shortfall because of COVID a year ago. We didn't know if we were actually going to be able to survive. The way that we are paid as a nonprofit is through districts, and districts suddenly couldn't pay anything. Everyone was home. So what we did was get together as a senior leadership team, just as I was telling Katie I would do. We thought about what are our core values. Truly, as an organization, we have two core values: centering our people, meaning centering, the teachers on our staff. And the other is really providing the highest quality instruction to leaders in the field. So how could we deal with this shortfall but keep with our core values? So what we decided to do was, rather than lay anyone off, because the last thing that we wanted to do was to lay people off in the middle of a pandemic when people really needed their health insurance. So we decided, starting as a leadership team, to furlough all of ourselves, taking, not being paid for the Friday, and doing that for quite a while. And then eventually had to furlough the entire staff. So everybody was working 4 days. And in that way, did not have to lay anyone off. The other thing that we did was we set a really high goal to turn all of our teaching that had historically always been in person, 75% of that teaching online, which we had never done, like many Greenfield Public School teachers, I'm sure. And we shifted 90% to online. The other thing that we did was we applied for the PPP, and we actually won it twice. So right now, we are way ahead of budget in a way that we have never been. So really, to answer your question, I think really knowing what are your core values, just something that I would want to do with this community, really update, be sure everyone's on the same page around core values. Then when you have a really hard decision, talk to your senior leadership. For me, that's principals, central office, as well as all of you. And make some really hard budget decisions, but knowing in your heart you are making the correct decisions because they align with what your values are. Mm-hmm.
The citizens in our community demand value for their tax dollars and transparency and fiscal accountability. In this light, tell us about how you have ensured that the budget you propose and the financial plan that you oversee as approved by the school committee is as compact and efficient as possible.
So this comes back to the person, the budget and the purse. I do believe that a budget should be incredibly transparent. I do believe taxpayers should fully understand what it is that we're paying for and why. So I'll say a few things about that. First, developing core values should be something that I do with the whole community. So the whole community should be fully aware of what the core values are. So then when we explain what it is we're budgeting for, it will really make a lot of sense because it fits with our core values. The other thing that I would do in terms of being really transparent is throughout the process, really be sure that not only was I just sharing drafts of the budget, but that I was also seeking input from various communities. So that's not just, sort of inviting people to see me here in the cafeteria, but really going out into the community, sharing drafts of the budget, sharing the core values, and really seeing what really matters to you, what really matters to your families, and really incorporating that in our decisions. In terms of transparency, what I would want to do, and I see pieces of this on the website, but I'd love to really even more, show all the versions of the budget and really have something clearly written that explains the decisions that we are making, especially those hard decisions. If there is a budget shortfall, for example, why did we make the decision that we did? One of the things that I certainly heard consistently throughout the day from every group that I spoke with had to do with communication and sort of a desire to really understand, have much more information about what is going on and why decisions are being made. So, this really fits in with that. I believe what I would try to do is communicate in a variety of ways. So certainly with the budget, but also with other important decisions, having things on the website, having community forums, going to families in their homes, inviting different groups into various schools to really be sure everybody is updated along the way, and people really have a variety of ways of offering feedback, not just sort of one survey, but periodic ways that we can gather input.
In this rural region, there are very few school transportation businesses. With limited options, what model would you recommend? District ownership or contracting for transportation services or something else? What are the advantages and disadvantages of these options, and what can be done to address high transportation costs?
So, Katie, I think in the 25 years I've been in education, transportation has been consistently such a struggle for districts. So, really here in Western Massachusetts, but also, in Eastern Massachusetts as well. So, probably, first, as a data nerd, what I would want is all of the data, to tell me what are the costs historically of having our own fleet versus leasing. So I would want to see all of this data. I do know in talking to a lot of colleagues who are in superintendents, they have found that having their own fleet is less expensive and more efficient. So, I'm assuming that might be something that would be a finding. Something that I would want to do is consider, if we were going to purchase our own fleet, what sorts of government incentives are available. Like, for example, right now I know the government is offering incentives to, buy more efficient vehicles, more fuel-efficient vehicles, more electric vehicles, which of course I know are more expensive. However, again, if we decided one of our core values was environmental justice, that could be a decision we would choose to make. So really what I would do is just look at the numbers, decide, talk to people who've, been thinking about issues of transportation for many years, really see what were the pros and cons based on that data, and then make a decision that was really in line with our core values.
Currently, in Greenfield, we have a school resource officer available at the police station, but not housed in our school buildings. As superintendent, would you continue this practice? What role, if any, do you see for school resource officers in our schools?
So I would choose to keep the school resource officers at the police headquarters if I were making that decision. The reason being, many black and brown children right now in our country are feeling very traumatized by the police. And I do think probably in terms of people in the building to assist when there is a moment of crisis would be, we would probably be better served with, social worker to really handle that situation. At the same time, something that I was saying to the parents earlier, I would want to certainly be working very closely with the chief of police here in Greenfield. If there was something that threatened the safety and security of children, certainly we would want to be in touch and call the police. But I think for most of the issues that would come up in a school, we could probably have more constructive responses through school professionals who had long-term who had some social work training as well as more long-term relationships with the students. So that would be my suggestion. Sure.
Thank you. We're really doing well on time. And the first thing I'd like to do now that we finished our formal questions is ask the school committee members if anyone would like to ask a follow-up question to any of the questions we've already asked. Member Hollands, you can always count on Member Hollands to want to follow up.
Excellent.
Yeah. I had a couple, but I'll start with one. You mentioned the importance of understanding the core values of a community, bringing people together. And my follow-up is, how do you use the information that's in place? Because I can think of, during my time with the district, at least 4 times there have been focused efforts to figure out, what are the real values, including for the superintendent search, and 2 or 3 times for the whole community getting together on, what's the plan, where do we want to go? And how do you assess what are the current critical issues versus, how do you use the data? That's my question, that's already in place about values and priorities. Or how do you gather that info?
So, thank you very much, Member Hollands. So what I would want to do, what I've heard just in my brief visits is that the core values could use some updating. So that's my little bit of data, but I want to check that. So assuming that we were going to create a new set of core values, the way that I would do that is really by, again, reaching out to all parts of the community, city organizations, partner organizations, teachers, students, parents, in a variety of ways to really be sure we're hearing all voices about what it is that's important to everyone in the community. Something that I think does happen sometimes with things like school improvement plans, core value statements, mission statements, is they're put on a shelf. I've certainly been guilty of that myself, but something that I have been able to do differently with core values, usually because they're stated pretty explicitly, is really use them as a rubric whenever I'm going to be making a hard decision, and really bringing that rubric along whenever I'm going to be helping a team make a hard decision as well. If we're going to have to come to consensus about something that might be fraught, really having a set of clear, concise core values, I have personally found in my leadership to be very helpful. So that having been said, something that I wouldn't want to do is come to Greenfield and just redo everything. You know, a lot of really good work has been done. I'm learning about more and more of it. So really building on what is here and what is strong, but in places where, such as core values, potentially there could be refurbishing, really engaging every part of the community to be sure when we're making hard decisions and we explain them to our community as reflecting our core values, that's going to really resonate because everybody's been part of the conversation. They've heard me raise them whenever there has been a hard decision to make. Sure.
I had one other follow-up. I'm thinking about what you just said, so I've got to switch and think about what I wanted to mention. In one of your questions, you answered talking about how you identify the key priorities. I think we were talking about budget. And what I wanted to say is that when we look at, what are urgent key priorities, I would say frequently similar topics come up. We have a low incidence special needs population. What's the best way to serve them? How in your work do you make sure that really important parts of our program that don't come up on the urgent needs list also get attention? Like we have programs that I'm not sure we've reviewed. They're never probably going to come up on the urgent priority list. Our guidance program in the high school. I don't know, our arts programs, we spend a lot of time talking about sports, maybe not so much time looking at our, music pops into my head. But we have maybe, I'll say, 20, 25 programs that are parts of our district, that are parts of our program from the youngest children to the oldest that aren't ever going to show up as a major priority. How do you make sure all these things get attention in a school district? Thank you.
It's a really great question. So something earlier was phrased also by the teachers, I believe, which was related. How do you sort of keep the discussion we were having was about UDL, and how do you, if there's been some sort of district level training for teachers, and there's a big exciting year where everybody's paying attention, how do you keep that going across the years beyond that first year when everyone's really focused on it? So what I think that's really important is to have a multi-year plan that really incorporates all parts of the district. So some of that is certainly professional learning. Some of that certainly is arts programming. Some of that is athletics. Some of that is leadership pipeline. Some of that is curriculum. And what I've done in the past is really have 5-year plans. The one I just created for our organization is called LA 2025. Now we're down to only 4 years of that plan. So really creating a plan that has all parts mentioned and really has clear targets and goals for all of those areas. And I think most importantly, has who is responsible for what and what the goal and target will be in the first year. Something in a launch year could be very involved, training every teacher in the district. But here too could be something like creating a program that is more advanced for teachers who've taken the year one, and some other program that's really to be sure to target any teachers who are new to the district. So really being planful about all parts of the district, thinking about what are the goals, what are the long-term targets, and how will we know that we've met them? And who is the person responsible? Certainly, ultimately, it's me. However, there should be a person who's sort of the lead on all of these aspects of the plan.
Thank you.
Any further follow-up? Okay, so if you would like to ask any questions of us, if you have a closing statement, all of that is up for grabs at this point.
So, certainly I've heard a lot from the community, but something I'd love to hear from all of you is what you are really seeking in your next superintendent.
You're all looking at me. Go ahead, Glenn, please. Secretary Johnson moves on, please.
I think one of the things that I would be looking for in particular would be a real focus on the curriculum and student outcomes and kind of aligning everything from pre-K through 12. I told this story that when I came, I applied to be on the committee because of a vacancy, and so I was out in the waiting room, and there were some teachers who were coming in preparing to make a presentation to the school committee about revamping the civics curriculum, which they were kind of doing by patchwork with a group of teachers going together to this conference the state put on about it, and there wasn't someone there in that role to kind of oversee the whole project. And so one thing I'm really pleased with is that we have hired an assistant superintendent for curriculum, but I think that the superintendent will also need to be playing a role, obviously, with that as a core concern. And one thing that I think would be great would be someone who maybe doesn't have to be the out front person, but is really good at lifting up and developing other people's leadership around curriculum.
So I was thrilled to hear Karen is on board. It's wonderful news. And I think that we would really make a great team because truly, I have tons of experience in every, part of the superintendency, from budgeting to scheduling to policy to working with boards. But much of my expertise truly is teaching and learning as well as coaching leaders. So something that I was hearing a lot from teachers today was a lack of coherence. Really, schools being in silos, having different curricula. So while Karen certainly would take the lead on a lot of the nuts and bolts, I have really vast experience in curriculum. I was in charge of teaching and learning in Amherst. In addition to being a data nerd, I'm a little bit of a curriculum nerd too. So really, I would want to be deeply involved in those conversations. I would want to be sure. I would never want our teachers to have scripted curriculum where we're expecting everybody to be on page 3, on Tuesday, March 3rd. That leaves out the beauty of teaching and learning and who the teacher is and who the child is. But at the same time, there is a lot of research behind best practices and different curricula and pedagogy. And what I would really want to be sure is that everything that we're choosing is certainly culturally responsive, certainly grade level standard or beyond, and really is relevant to the outside world. So it feels meaningful, whether a student is, 3 or 4 or 18. So those would really be sort of my non-negotiables that I would want to bring to decisions about curriculum.
Anyone else want to add anything? Me?
Well, go ahead. Everyone's going to answer, right?
We don't all have to answer. Do you have something? Go ahead. I'm good.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Well, I love the question, what you're looking for. So, I've been thinking about this a lot. I'd like our next superintendent to be not only a convergent thinker, but a divergent thinker. I would like someone who really can think about new and different ways of doing things, but then if there's a way, something we want to do, to apply their intellectual resources to converge on how to do it. Some people are good with divergent thinking, some convergent. I'd like someone that has both sets of skills. Open about new and different ways of doing things if they make sense. I would like someone who appreciates not only where we need to take our school district in the future, but I hope we don't waste time redoing things that we've done well before. When I travel around the community, I'm always amazed how many people have served in the school district, either as school leaders or they've been on the school committee. There's a lot of people in Greenfield that have lived here for a long time, and they've served on a lot of committees. And there's a wealth of decisions that have been made. Even, you're in a brand new high school. This took a lot of time to think through, maybe 15 years, to not lose some of the decisions that have been made previously as we're making decisions for the future, to not think it's pointless. I'm very interested in financial management. What usually happens, which is worrisome to me, in the school district, there's very little discretionary funding, and the discretionary, because there's so many contractual, most of the funds are contractual, and maybe that's 3 or 4%, and that's usually student supplies. And often, if there's a shortfall, the things that the students need to learn, the purpose of the organization. So I'm interested in how we look at finances, and including how we address poverty and racial equity, which is a concern. And I think that's it. Those are things that are on my mind. The other thing is that the diversity of opinion in the community. We are a really diverse community in a lot of different ways, and parents want different things for their children. So we literally have students that want to be aeronautic engineers, and they want to go to the finest colleges for engineering, and we have people who really want a great technical background, and college isn't their aspiration, and we have to figure out how we have the right programs, the best that we can with our money, to get students where they want to go in their future, inspire them to have goals. And I just want to say before I stop talking, I loved your comment about continuous improvement, because I think that's the key. Thank you.
Member Karen and then Member Ekstrom.
You've already heard my answer to this question the first time we met, and I heard very clearly that you heard me. We have amazing leaders, we have amazing kids, we have amazing community members. We're just not all working to the same place at the same time. And it never became more obvious to me in this past year. I just really didn't understand how distant we were from each other, even though we actually were all working towards the exact same goal. And that goes from getting our curriculum equalized across 3 different elementary schools and merging them into a middle school that works for getting equitable for socially, economically disadvantaged children, and racial justice, and environmentally renewable resources. It works all the way across. Everybody has these interests, and we're not driving the bus in the same direction. And that's what I hope for in a superintendent, is all of these things that we have in our community that are amazing, and I see them every day, and they're not all working to the same direction at the same time, and we end up working against each other by accident. And I really need someone to lead us in that direction.
Hi. I actually, and no one here will be surprised when I say this, I'm looking for our special education and pupil services to advance quite a bit. I think that we don't have a robust enough system. I think, my goal, and I say this a million times, is to provide the best education possible for our students and our children in our community, and I don't know that we've done that for our special needs population, our English language learners, those non-typical students. I don't know that we've done that. And the flip side being, I also don't know that we have. So I would love for us to expand what we are able to do, and I'd love for us to have more students come home, because they live in this community and they should be seen in this community, and that's something I've always been interested in.
Well, and listening to all of the other members, there's a leadership thread there. You know, a solid leader can take the fiscal management piece, the curriculum piece, the excellent staff piece, the special education pieces, and figure out how to lift us up by tying all of those things together. Probably under your leadership, it would be, you know, with our core values. I've heard you come back to that, and I appreciate that sort of, I would call it systematic thinking. I don't know, that's just my own way of categorizing how, you know, people like you work, is, you know, you constantly come back to a core or a center to then be able to identify how to move forward. So I would not add anything else to what these folks have said. I would love to hear if you have other questions for us. That would be awesome.
So is it okay if I just respond to a couple of things that I've just heard?
Absolutely. We
Okay.
want this to be more of a discussion, so
Okay.
absolutely, please.
So something just in terms of what Susan was saying, I did hear a lot about special education today. You know, I know there's a high percentage, unusually high percentage of students on IEPs. So something that I would be interested to consider as a priority certainly is looking at our Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction to really be sure that it's solid. Because usually when you see large percentage of students, unusual percentage, there might be an issue as a root cause in the Tier 1 or Tier 2. So I would want, you know, I don't know if that's the case, but I heard a lot that made me think and wonder more. So that would be something I'd want data on. Something also that I have been part of is really this idea of bringing children home. So I assume when you say that, you're talking about having programs that are successful for kids here as opposed to, so that's another way to see cost efficiency that I have been involved with. I think the most important part about making that decision is really to center students. You know, you don't ever want to do something to save money if it doesn't center students. But if you can create a really inclusive, specialized program in your community, I do think that is much better. It's certainly more cost effective. So really love to continue to look into those things. Something that I was involved in and supportive of in Amherst that's still continuing is co-teaching. So really that can be an excellent model as well for being more inclusive. Really catching kids who need a little more Tier 2 support before you know, to ensure students who need to be referred for an IEPR, but those who just need a little more support are getting it. So I wanted to say that to you, Susan. Something to other Susan. There's a lot of Susans.
Oh, you haven't even heard all of them yet.
So for Susan Hollins, you know, I really appreciate what you were saying about the divergent and convergent thinker. You know, I am aware I'm a little bit of an unorthodox candidate. You know, I haven't sort of done the totally traditional route, you know, principal to assistant principal, principal to assistant superintendent to superintendent. You know, I sort of took a circuitous route to the nonprofit. But I really do think that the experience that I've had over the past 4 years, seeing school systems all over the country, really helping leaders solve some of the most challenging problems that any of us could imagine, and really seeing the ways that schools are innovating, creating successful, culturally responsive learning environments is something that really is a gift that I would love to bring here to Greenfield. So I appreciate your consideration, because I do know that I'm unorthodox. However, you know, I see it as, I I see it as a real plus. I hope that you all will as well.
Thank you. Do you have anything else for us tonight?
So I just wanted to say in closing, thank you so much for really inviting me to your community. It was beautiful to really have the opportunity. I had lunch with students. I talked to teachers. I talked to parents. So it was really amazing to have that honor. Thank you. Thanks also for your thoughtful questions. The discussion has only furthered my belief that you all are seeking a highly committed instructional leader who has an equity lens, who will bring integrity to all of the district's most important decisions. I do believe I bring those very leadership strengths that this community is seeking right now, and I do hope to have the opportunity to collaborate with all of you, the families of Greenfield, the teachers, to truly build an exceptional school system here in this city. So thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today and this evening, and all of your thoughtful answers to our questions, and your clear enthusiasm for the job. I appreciate that as well. And if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Member Holland, and a second.
I will second.
Secretary Johnson-Musad. And are there any no votes or abstentions to that? We are adjourned at 7:03 p.m. Thank you so much.